Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton Agenda AWANI dan ini musim kita melihat kepada 1 tahun Malaysia Baru. It's nearly a year to the day that Malaysia had a very historical change in political leadership of the nation. Soalnya, di mana kita sekarang dalam pelbagai perkara lain. Ramai yang mungkin agak jemu mendengar dan membicarakan tentang perkara-perkara politik. Tetapi politik itu jika diambil, nasib baik saya dulu di universiti ambillah kertas 101 sejarah dan juga sains politik. Dalam kertas 101 sains politik tu dia kata politics is about who has the power to aggregate resources to those who needs those resources. Saya nak ambil pendekatan itu kerana jika politik adalah tentang mengagihkan sama ada kemakmuran negara ataupun tentang kawalan dan sebagainya, di mana kita sekarang? Bukan tentang parti atau kumpulan parti dan sebagainya. Untuk itu, kerana Malaysia baru perlukan diskusi baru, the new Malaysia needs also new discourse to happen. Saya ada pasangan yang sukar nak dapat di seluruh dunia. Pasangan yang bukan saja ada pertalian nama dan darah dan DNA, tetapi mereka kedua-duanya hebat dalam bidang aktivisme sosial or social activism. And remember what Martin Luther King said about being active for the people. You can Google that, but I'm speaking in English because I want to bring this topic a bit higher from the macro perspective of the world, because Malaysia needs to be up there with the best in the world. And do we have the best in the world for social activism, for environmental activism, for whatever else activism? Kerana kalau kita pulang ke tahun sebelum merdeka pun, Hari Hartal dulu, 1948, dan gerakan oleh pertubuhan-pertubuhan sosial sebenarnya. Angkatan Wanita Sedar, Angkatan Pemuda Insaf bukanlah parti politik berdaftar kerana penjajah British tidak membenarkan pendaftaran sebarang parti politik. Maka semuanya bermula sebagai parti yang memperjuangkan hak sosial masyarakat dan sebagainya. Tapi kini, selepas Malaysia Baru, di mana letaknya perjuangan ini? Where is it now? Or do we cringe when we hear the word he or she is a social activist? The best person to us would be the social activists themselves. Closest to me, I think the more senior in the group will be Debbie Stothard. She has 2 hats mainly. One is the coordinator for ALTSEAN-BURMA. The other is the one that stood me up for my scheduled interview at the World Economic Forum ASEAN in Hanoi, because the government of the day there refused to entertain the request to go in. Secretary General of International Federation for Human Rights, or FIDH. But I got my revenge. I got to interview her in January this year in Davos, which is even higher in altitude. Then we have Sheryll Stothard, the more colourful hair one, colourful life, from the corporate environment before, but now also heavily into social activism. Now, of course, a social activist. But I came across Sheryll again recently when Agenda AWANI was looking at the plight of the families whose head of the family disappeared, just like that. And because the Suhakam Act is a natural act in our constitution, so the public inquiry done by Suhakam is also something that is empowered by the constitution. And the public inquiry found that there are state apparatus involved in the disappearance of Pastor Raymond Koh and Saudara Amri Cik Mat. But who's helping the family? Who's helping the wife that overnight has to take over all these things? That's Sheryll. So I gave a long intro because I wanted to set it in context. So Debbie, up to you. If people say social activists now, do they look at you differently, or?
I can remember in the 80s when my sisters introduced me to their friends and said, "This is my sister Debbie, the human rights activist." And physically they're ooh. But I think in the past 2 decades, gradually the situation has changed, especially after the movement in 1998, the movement for reformasi, both in Indonesia and Malaysia. So now I'm a little bit respectable. People don't say ooh, they say oh.
But so, is it enough in the days of new Malaysia?
I think I think part of moving forward New Malaysia is the acceptance of social activism, especially the willingness to think and discuss human rights. So I think this new sophisticated understanding that human rights is a fundamental part of development is part of this attitude in New Malaysia. So now people are, I think, a little bit more friendly and less afraid to be seen with me.
Politicians? Government officers?
Sometimes it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think when it comes to, say, the Suhakam chair, who's just resigned, Tan Sri Razali Ismail, he's an international diplomat, so he does not feel hesitant. But I think there are still people in government or representing
ministries, institutions that guards us, like, you know, authorities.
Well, I think there has to be a cultural change, and it takes time for that to happen.
So you want cultural change together with the political change of Malaysia Baharu?
When I talk about cultural change, I'm not talking about Malaysia Truly Asia food and dance.
Tak payah pakai baju
kebangsaan. I'm talking about the human rights culture.
Yes.
So we also have to understand that we have a change in government, but we have to also be proactive in leadership to ensure that the bad habits and the bad attitudes in the ministries, in the civil service is shifted so that it's more oriented to rakyat, not to
that
government.
That starts with discourse. Out of mind, out of sight?
Yes.
Do you think the discourse has improved?
I think the discourse has improved slightly. And I think there's a long way to go, because at the moment in ASEAN, we are facing a huge challenge. The traditional advocates for human rights and democracy have gone backwards. So Malaysia should not feel complacent that they are leaders by default. They should be leaders in terms of aspiring to a higher standard, not just for Malaysia, but for the entire region.
Was it easy having an activist for, you know, to be introduced as a family member before and now?
Oh no. We in the family we've always been very proud of Debbie. I think, and she's been sort of the conscience of the family as well. So we try not to get on her wrong side from terms of values. So personally, Debbie has been a role model for me. And I know she'd be shocked to hear that.
Yes, I am.
It doesn't sound so before, but now it's said in public.
Yes. But I have told her that, but she doesn't listen. We don't always agree on everything. I find calling myself a social activist a bit weird, because I feel it's an affectation, because so many people have done a lot more to earn the right to call themselves activists. You see, I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as an honor. So it's just that the other day, you know, as I'm reading through the Suhakam decision, and they referred to me in there as a social activist, because I was a witness in the inquiry. So I guess if Suhakam calls me a social activist, therefore I
must be. Was it easy, that transition from corporate life? Because in the old Malaysia definition of activism, social, plus corporate worker, rat race kind of thing, it's like one is not even thinking about job security or money or whatever, and the other is that side. This is, you know, also the negative discourse done by powers that be against the gender movement or human rights movement before. But now in the 21st century, do you feel that we are caught in between the old and the young? Because some that has known you from the corporate circle, you know, like they will be surprised to hear, or is that not the case?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think when I moved out of the corporate circles, it was my decision to keep a distance from my former corporate clients, for instance, or friends. But I don't think Malaysians are necessarily against human rights or against activism. They may have the wrong impression sometimes. Macam kalau we frame this whole thing in the terms of hak asasi, it becomes very
contentious.
It becomes an intellectual discussion with them. But you must actually explain to them their rights. Then they will understand.
Kita nak ambil peluang ni. I want to take this opportunity to get a free masterclass lessons from these two siblings on human rights and other rights, because New Malaysia has got to acknowledge that the world has changed. Business imperative alone no longer can or viably be seen as totally detached from human rights, because look at palm oil, the greatest enabler for thousands of families in Malaysia in the agriculture or peladangan sector. But the moment Europe decides that we do not want palm oil to be imported anymore, 3, 4, 5 years from now, that is a huge loss of revenue for the nation. And what do? The reason is because they believe that we are not sustainable in our production, that every bottle of palm oil, cooking oil that they use contributes to one cute little baby orangutan dying in the forest of Borneo, for example. So activism and business now is very intertwined, but we're going to get their own experience on, specifically from Sheryll on enforced disappearance, on Debbie, because she looks at Burma for the longest time. I'm so sad until today, the sadness that I can't kick out, that my home state that I cherish so much called Perlis, the smallest state, is home and on record to have the biggest grave, mass grave in the country. And until now, no locals has been indicted. This is like the subprime crisis. No one in Wall Street has been indicted when it's so huge and in your face. And the biggest mass grave, we only have foreigners as agents or whatever, and surely they're not the kingpin. Surely they can't be the one moving these things. So these are the things, the hard facts, the what's and all of New Malaysia looking at new discourse, especially from the rights perspective and activism. Agenda AWANI. You are still here watching Agenda AWANI with two great names of activism in Malaysia. I'm so proud at the World Economic Forum Davos because this year, last January, very little nation presence, apart from Petronas and MITI, but I have Debbie Stothard there, and she's a very respected voice on activism in Davos. And so I'm going to start with you before I go to enforced disappearance. No longer are the days that we don't know. We don't want to interfere in our neighboring ASEAN country because we have political ties, we have military ties, zone of peace, freedom and neutrality. But the Rohingyas are coming here anyway, if we look at it. And rather than allow some sections, they might be minority only, of the country to behave like Donald Trump wannabes in saying that these people should be kicked out, they're creating social problems and crime, petty theft, whatever it is, why don't we use this long standing that we have of respect and diplomacy in the world to help solve this thing at the source? Because we are champion of many things, Islamic and halalan, toyuban, sukuk and everything. Why can't we use that influence? Because it seems like very much it's a religious issue in Burma or Myanmar.
I think in this case, you talk about the zone of peace, freedom and neutrality. ASEAN really has not been a zone of peace or freedom. And that has been the problem. When we talk about non-interference and sovereignty, in international relations, it's quite clear that your sovereignty extends to the, you enjoy sovereignty as long as you are able to protect and sustain your population. This is the reality. We can't just say this is a non-interference, it's sovereignty. Let's totally ignore crimes against humanity happening in our neighboring country, because now we're seeing that all of those crimes came back to our territory. Like Wang Keliang is both a result of the crimes that were happening in Burma, which Malaysia and other ASEAN countries traditionally ignored for decades, but also about weaknesses in our own system.
So isn't it appropriate that the sitting chair for SWAKAM was Tan Sri Razali as well? Because for the longest time, he was even trying diplomatically to be the midwife to ease Burma, or Myanmar as they call it now, to transition into democracy.
I think it's a loss to Malaysia that Tan Sri Razali, who is internationally renowned, both for the time he served as the President of the UN General Assembly and the time that he served as UN Special Envoy on Myanmar, has resigned prematurely. I think it's a very big wake-up call for the new Malaysia that things are not proceeding as they should when it comes to human rights. And when we talk about the new Malaysia, you have to understand when the change in government happened and the aspiration was expressed by the new government and the general population that we will do better. The global human rights community was so excited. They were congratulating me, say, hey, look, your country is changing. That's amazing.
Even I was congratulated in Davos.
Yes, exactly. And in the past, most people want to do the human rights meetings in Bangkok or somewhere. Oh, let's do it in Kuala Lumpur because, you know, it's new Malaysia.
Free,
So I think the Malaysian authorities and the Malaysian population need to appreciate that the status of Malaysia globally has grown, but it's slipping back down when we have this expose of the official involvement in enforced disappearance. It's not the revelation that is the problem. It's the failure by the authorities to respond. So if the Malaysian government just sits on its hands and don't know and pretend nothing is wrong,
but maybe it takes time.
No, the facts are already in front of them. They should be showing that they are proactive and say, we take this situation seriously and we will do the necessary investigation and the changes that's required to prevent it from happening. You have to remember, enforced disappearance is a crime against humanity. So although the situation is not widespread to be a crime against humanity, if we allow it to continue and more people to be disappeared, then Malaysia is in trouble.
Any government that is guilty of having a hand and the fact that it's termed enforced disappearance because of the state apparatus, that can't be accepted by any democratic nation and community. But I want to go to Sheryll now and link, because she's helping the families, victims of enforced disappearance, as acknowledged by the SWAKAM inquiry. Can we link this all the way back to awareness? Because when we look at it, the families now also under tremendous pressure from society around them because of the presupposition of why the enforced disappearance happened to the heads of their families. So go back to all the way to 96 when, you know, the older sibling managed to get you a free stay in the Malaysian lockup for protesting against...
Not protesting.
Supporting.
Attended a conference.
Yeah, you attended and you're supporting the cause of East Timor, and you put in lockup for that. Until now, is the missing link the general awareness and education of the community for this? Because we might be lacking social activists. If I remember correctly, Reformasi took a lot of social activists to become politicians. And now who's left behind? Only the siblings.
Well, I mean, disclaimer, I was a politician for a very short time. I was vice president of Parti Rakyat before it merged with PKR, to become PKR. But that was a very short
baptism of fire.
Few years maybe, yeah. So and I made way for Siva Rasa to take over my position as vice president. This was after APSET 2. Yes. Now coming back to this issue about society. Yeah? I don't think it's a question of that society is not aware of things. Okay. I think it's a cultural issue. Okay? The culture of impunity by anyone, whether it's military but in Malaysia it's more the police, because our military is kept out of positions of power, right? So it's the police. The culture of impunity is encouraged by the people of Malaysia as well. For instance, if you take situations where people get shot, right? So-called gangsters or robbers or anyone, orang kena tuduh lah, right? OKT, a suspect is just shot, and what is the approach? What's the reaction?
See,
most Malaysians
isn't that
have? Most Malaysians says,
simplistic
fine, good.
moral right,
They go,
moral
good.
judgment.
Yeah. We don't have to take it to court. Nobody has.
So kalau you jahat, you deserve that.
Yeah. You just assume straight away that if the police shot you, you must something's wrong with you.
So what do we do about this? Okay, last 1 minute. I'm going to ask the producer to give us a bit of allowance.
So I think Malaysians need to try to understand that what happened, whether it happened to a gangster or a suspected robber or a migrant worker who's so poor cannot afford anything, tried to rob someone, or even a pastor or social activist in
sorry
police.
to have to ask you this, but you're not saying that because you don't care whether Islam is protected or the Malays are protected. You care about everyone and everybody's right, right? Yeah. But it's so easy to just cast your argument aside by saying you're a liberal Malaysian.
No, I think
liberal is a good word in social activism, right?
Well, liberal,
but in Malaysia it's like, don't you agree?
Liberal can mean a lot of things. I don't think I'm helping out the families of the victims because of my liberalism, because they are not liberal, by the way. They're not liberal.
Cikgu Yati is a Malay Muslim mother.
Yeah, Muslim. And
with kids.
Raymond Koh is a pastor, evangelical pastor. They are very far
so
away.
Because they deserve,
they're not liberal.
They deserve the rights.
Yeah.
Okay, for you, 30 seconds. Sum this up for us.
You don't have to care for human rights because you're some kind of activist. You have to care for human rights because you're a human being.
Yes.
And all the things that we take for granted for ourselves, our children, our families, our colleagues, came from a philosophy of human rights. And if you allow this to happen to people who are different from you, eventually the perpetrators will think it's safe to do the same bad things to you.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much. I wish I could give more time, but never mind. You can always come again, either separately or together. Together, so powerful. Thank you so much. Thanks to your parents for bringing you up as you are, giving Malaysians hope for the future, because New Malaysia is not just about economic and wealth creation. New Malaysia is also about including everyone in the just society, and to do that, you need the social component, because the economic component and the political component, we saw in the last old Malaysia what happened when we just leave it at these two forces to rule the country. Ini Malaysia Baru dan anda menonton Agenda AWANI.